Now. Admitting all. All right, well, everyone is joining. We're excited to be here today. I'm Carolina Wheat with Artfare, curator here. This is one of our Thursday special live artist studio visits, interviews. They kind of come and go as they please in relationship to the accessibility since quarantine. And we are very lucky tonight to have Mr. Ian McMahon. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. It looks like you're in your studio right now. This is a treat.
I know. Well, we actually finally got internet here, so it is a treat to be able to communicate this way in this space. So yes, so it's nice to be in the studio. Yeah.
Absolutely. As much as I love doing studio visits where, we can walk around and be more tactile and kind of peer through older works where you're like, don't look at that. Don't look at it. A lot of your work, thankfully, is, it's so large. I mean, you're a real Renaissance man, if you don't mind me saying, Ian. You've got... I always love that compliment myself, so I think
I'll take it.
You might be okay. Well, I mean, not only are you materialist, like you know how to source materials. You're practically you are a sculpture artist. You've studied ceramics. You've done large scale, interactive, almost performative works. You're a plasterer. You're a designer. You've got a lot of tools in your tool shed. But
I definitely think about it like I wear a lot of hats. I mean, I love all those hats, and like I hope that they come across in the work. They're all those things have kind of driven, equally driven the work as well as the work has driven them to kind of get more honed in and better. But definitely, I see myself as like wearing all those during the course of the start of a project to its finale. So
absolutely. I mean, even your very practical skills in carpentry are so instrumental to being able to build some of these larger sculptures. And the work that that was at the Mad in Seattle, was it called Eloquy?
Mad Art.
Oh, Mad Art.
Yeah.
Is that work still up?
No, so that was like the last big project before the current state of affairs kind of rained down on us. So I was there last year. This time I was kind of gearing up for that. And then the install for that was, I drove out right after Christmas and was there on the road New Year's, and then was out there for the beginning of January building that piece. So that piece was supposed to have about a 2.5 month run, but Seattle being kind of the first place that really got hit with COVID, ended up shutting down about halfway through. So it's kind of let down, but at the same time, I know people that were working on shows that they built that didn't even get an opening. So at least I was at the opening, people got to see it. But it did feel like, the wind got let out of the sails, so to speak, but it did in everything. So,
that was really, I mean, that's kind of your last large scale installation sculpture that you've done. In 2020, even though that wasn't the intention, right? It was also up longer than you intended. Is that right?
It was, yeah. I mean, in a way, the piece itself existed longer. It didn't really get much of an audience while it was sitting there during lockdown, but it did run. They kept it up maybe an extra 3 or 4 months. I can't totally remember. And then I actually made the choice. They gave me the choice to come out or not come out to bring it down, which is normally I'm very involved in like all stages of the process, obviously. And I was supposed to go out and bring it down. And then I kind of made the call that I wasn't going to get on a plane at that point in time. So it was a really strange ending to that piece, given that I had to kind of write blueprints and have someone on the ground. And it's a ton of work, and I really don't like putting that on anyone else but myself. I mean, I made it, and I'm really the sole laborer, although I do have an assistant sometimes helping me here and there. With that project I did, somebody very invaluable to making it, but it just was strange not to go back there and to put that task on someone else and not see the piece through its final I think bringing it down, I learned so much about it again, and being able to revisit them, especially when it takes so long to make them, to be able to have some space to go back and see them.
And yeah, well, I mean, just to, hone and kind of going back, I don't know if you have any images of the work, because the image that we put out there for this particular artist talk, and certainly that's on your site and a lot of places online, it's hard to kind of see the actual structure. Like, part of this was, being able to go behind the work, be inside the work, and kind of feel that raw front and back energy, like inside, outside. And then lastly, like, I really want to talk more about how involved you truly are with not only the assemblage, the design, the planning, the assemblage, but also that exquisite moment of performative demise.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I could show you. They actually, Mad Art hired someone to film, and they did like a short video documentation of it, which is kind of nice. So I could share you that if you want.
Let's look at the piece first.
Well, that's what it is. It's still images of like a walk around the piece. Do you want to see?
Great. Oh yeah, perfect.
It's kind of nice. I mean, I actually haven't even really revisited it until tonight, and then I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I just have never had anything done like that of my work, and there was so much going on, I just didn't like really consume it. But should we look at it?
Yeah, let's look at it.
Let's try it. Let's see if I can do this here. I think there's sound, but I turned that part off. Let's see here. And obviously we can talk.
Mm-hmm.
Is it working? Oh,
it's not.
I'm gonna turn the sound off.
Yet.
Is this playing or no?
Don't see it yet.
Can you see something?
No. This work is aperture?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me see if I can turn the sound off.
You might want to just minimize the 2019 text. Well, this folder, maybe minimize this Finder screen.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I can do it a different way.
And then play it, or like maybe drag it to QuickTime or something.
How about this?
Yes.
Better? Okay. Is that working?
It sure is.
Cool. Yeah, so I turned the sound off, but this kind of gives a bit of a, sort of like you're walking through it view, or at least giving you a little bit more sense of the piece. But yeah, so this was aperture. I've made a series of these inflated, so this is all cast plaster. So this is kind of the moment where you actually get to see inside the piece, like you were talking about. So there's all this kind of infrastructure to be able to create these hallways and form, so I can traverse through the forms to actually spray them with plaster. So I'm basically building a huge set of inflatable molds. This one was 50, I think 51 individual molds that are then all connected together. And then inflated and pressurized as one unit. And then I kind of build an antechamber to be able to get in and out of the piece. So yeah, so I've been building these for quite a while, where you're just seeing the exterior inflated forms, and I spend a considerable amount of time inside the pieces casting them, usually, up to 2 weeks every day in there spraying plaster. So there's this whole architecture that evolved for the inside, not only in terms of a purposeful structure for me to move through, but there's just a lot of that energy and information of making that happens in there, and all the mess and the kind of marks and the drips and the footprints, and just there was this whole language that I just kind of fell in love with. So this is the first time that I've been able to actually open up the interior and give someone access to it in a way that I felt fairly successful. I mean, there's been a lot of other pieces where I end up leaving like a doorway that's kind of closed, but that was like the entranceway into the structure, because obviously I need to have some sort of entrance to get into the piece. But I leave that as kind of evidence that part of that process. And it's kind of this little signature of where I was kind of, there was something happening interiorly to the piece to actually make it happen. And people always wanted to go in that, like, they're like, oh, can I go in this door? Like, I want to go in the thing. And it never made sense to me, like, that way, like, to let them in that door, it was too close to architecture. Like, I really want the pieces to be extremely present and architectonic, and they're really big, and their relationship to architecture is really interesting and important to me. But I never wanted them to, like, someone to enter a door and go into it like they had the building. And so I've always been trying to I really wanted to try to explore, was it beneficial to show someone the inside? Because I found it very satisfying and rewarding, and kind of led to a whole nother layer of conversation about these pieces. So this was the first time where the architecture kind of dictated a space to kind of divide the piece in half and create this kind of interior cavity.
I mean, I have so many questions about process, and I'm sure
we need
our audience does too. I mean, I understand that a lot of folks first perceive these works as being these large scale inflatable fabric, pillowy, billowy fabrics, so, textiles. But the fact is, you mentioned, I mean, it is plaster, sprayed plaster, but I trust in order to get that kind of billowiness that there is some sort of inflatable aspect to it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, these, like, yeah, exactly. So all these are inflatable molds. So those are built using just 2 mil plastic and patterns and a hair straightener to kind of weld all the seams together. So I'm basically creating a whole bunch of, in this case, they're just like big rectangular bags. And then I have, those are all interconnected. So they're kind of, those become, even though there's visually kind of individual forms, those are one cavity, all kind of interconnected, in which I can add pressure to. So I have all of these squirrel fans, which are kind of snail fans, which are meant for, like, blowing air on the ground. So they have a lot of CFM, a lot of pressure. And then I have a whole tube structure that I've kind of devised. So these are all the engineering kind of components that I've kind of developed, that I love, that kind of develop and grow over the years. So this is kind of I use gates, like channel gates that would be on a dust collection system to be able to control the pressure perfectly for those. Because obviously you need just the right amount of pressure. If there's too much, you're blowing out the seams. If there's too little, you're not able to kind of build up a shell of plaster on the inside of those pieces. And then also I have to be able to get inside of it. Go on. You have a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would just like stop you right now because I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
How do you seam then the poly? And if you're using poly, like, are you using 2-ply poly? And then what? I mean,
yeah, I use, those ones are particularly 2 mil, but I just use a hair straightener, like that you would straighten your hair with. So it's like a heat welding. So I'm kind of just crimping and welding along the seams to create the different forms.
That puckering, the ruching almost is just it then again lends to that really textile look.
Totally. And then I'm also playing with that. Like, I could do it much in a bit, like, better or smoother, but I'm also over the course of these pieces, I've gotten, like, all of those folds and puckers and kind of imperfections are what give the piece the kind of magic or the allure, the visual kind of trickery, where it feels like they really do feel taut, and those shadows and all of those little moments kind of play into how you perceive the piece initially. So that kind of seaming has kind of developed over the course of those pieces for sure. And I kind of play with that even more often. And right now there's just so many possibilities with those inflated forms that I kind of had to narrow some certain things down. So those ones in particular, like, I kind of was like, okay, I'm just going to use rectangles and squares, because there's just so many options that I had to kind of, to start with those, I kind of gave myself some sort of parameter, because there were just so many different ways to play with it. But I'm really interested in how patterning and, like, thinking about patterns is something that is, like, on my brain a ton right now. And how that could, just the complexity of how that can happen, and like quilting and patterning in that way just kind of gets me really excited. I've been thinking about that a lot with these pieces. So
yeah, almost like the macro and micro versions of everything. Almost it would be really compelling to make a ton of little pillows or shapes of squares that move quickly into a massive structure, you know, and where now the kind of over flow of the air and the poly, the the way that you're blowing the plaster though, Ian, it's just so commendable because the illusion is there, and you want to touch it. It's so smooth. Do you end up sanding all of it at the very end, or how do you
I do
treat
not
that?
touch it. Like
Really?
the whole, really the whole point is like the minute the mold, like I can't touch something after it comes out of a mold. And I think that's part of like something I just, of my own
That's your rule.
obsession. I don't even know if it's a rule. It's just like, I just realized like when I touch, like the hand is on the inside, the hand is like all before, and obviously a ton of labor to get that plaster on there. But like, it's all of that prep work where when that comes off, like I'm not disrupting the material in any way after that. So, I mean, it's just crazy. So I'm making really thin shells. So in like mold making terms, I'm kind of using the object itself as not only the final cast, but also the mother mold. Because if you think about 2 mil plastic and air, there's a lot of buoyancy. Like I can take those molds and I can push my hand into them and they're constantly moving. Like the air pressure, no matter what, is always changing just slightly. And I've built an antechamber. So I've built a room before the actual mold. So I have all the molds inflated and then I have a room with doors that's also under pressure. So I pressurize that to the same pressure as the molds. Because if you think about like, if I had all those molds under pressure, every time I climbed in and out of them, they deflate. Well, I need to keep them exactly the same pressure because when I'm adding layers and layers of plaster, so I need them to stay the right form so I can put a part of a shell on, put more of a shell on, put more of a shell on. So I have an antechamber that's pressurized and I'm traversing through that to get into the pieces, to get in and out of them over the course of like 2 weeks. So the pressure is like really critical to kind of creating those forms. But I usually can start about, like in the case of like the piece that I just showed, Aperture, like I can start usually 3 forms a day. And I'm kind of putting a shell on one, going to the next one, putting a shell on, putting a shell, and then going back and the plaster's hardened. So when I say it's kind of like a mother mold, the plaster, I'm putting a really thin layer on, and then that's kind of helping give rigidity to the plastic. And then I can add a little more, add a little more, add a little more. So they're not like, I'm not spraying those like all over the place willy-nilly. There's like a real rhyme and reason and a real material specificity. Like I've just developed kind of a real, artisan process of this thing that I just got, that I've kind of honed in on in terms of like when you can add more. The plaster's always wanting to like expand and contract, and it doesn't like what I'm doing. I mean, I'm basically like putting water to it, letting it go through a chemical process, then spraying wet plaster back on it. And plaster doesn't really want to do that. So you're kind of tricking it into basically not falling apart as you're kind of building up these layers.
Right. I mean, and thank you for being so upfront about the process, the materials and the pressures, and, all the engineering that goes into this kind of, invention. And I guess it came to question, do you ever worry about copycats, or have you ever had copycats, or do you
I used to think about it a lot. And then I realized that like, it's such a pain in the ass that you have to like want it so bad. Like I'm literally like, these pieces put me to the extent of what I can possibly do. And think about being inside these bubbles. I have a full face respirator on. I'm covered head to toe in plaster. The plaster setting, so usually it's like 100 degrees plus. And I'm changing. I can't breathe. Like you're breathing. The whole thing is like, it's just like full on abuse. And I'm bending over to get like plaster into this tiny little crack. And I'm doing that for 24 days, for 12 days, 15 days after I've already put all the infrastructure. I mean, it's just like, you have to really want it. Like I want it so bad. No, like I feel like, go ahead, try to do it. I mean, I think that there's this process in particular. Sometimes I think about like, it's kind of, I've got it so that's my own thing kind of. I mean, I'm sure other people are doing something similar, but I don't think to this scale and like in this way. So sometimes I think about that and I wonder, but I also think that there's so much that isn't like, you can watch a video of me making one and then I'd be like, oh yeah, go ahead. Like go spray an inflatable. It's like so much knowledge that's in here. It's just like known body knowledge that I think like,
Well,
I don't know.
honest.
I don't know. I mean, I do think about it. I've thought about it before, where I was like,
Definitely.
people are like, what gun do you use? And like, what do you, and I'm just like, oh, this is what I use. And, like, here it all is. I don't know. I'm less about hiding that, because it just doesn't.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it's a testament to your confidence, your craft, and it's also I don't think it really is at all ego driven either, because it feels as if you're like, you know what, hey, you want to torture yourself, in other words, but it seems as if you've really honed in and you've reinvented this idea, and the presence that you have, you have got the past, because you're sitting there making and making and making, and you're thinking about your very physical nature inside these materials, outside the materials, how the materials interact with each other, how they are frustrated by each other as well, and how you control that. And I suppose what I'm getting at is that past, and then your presence, and then, like at Bemis, when you were doing that work with the curtains, that is a little different from this work, but it still had the elegance and the facade of fabric of sorts. And then that particular piece really shocked, I think, a lot of folks, because it stood for weeks in a space at the center, and it's in Omaha, right? Bemis.
Yeah, actually, that one didn't stand for weeks, but that was the first one that I.
Okay.
I mean, if should we talk about? I can.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that, because I just want to go backwards real quick to the past, because that's a very present piece that you're working on. And you were talking about shapes, and you're talking about actually letting your audience in, both physically and proverbially, as we're talking about how you're making it. With I want to kind of look at that early work with the sprayed plaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think though, so the Bemis piece you're talking about was a curtain, like a kind of classic theater curtain, or image of, as likely of it as possible. But that one, I was making some of the other inflatable ones too. I mean, so like my journey with plaster is basically since grad school, and my background is in ceramics, and I see like that being so critical to the way I make sculpture, in terms of just the material.
You feel that obsession in the work,
and like ideas come out of a material, and I see material to me as like a collaborator. Like when I find a material that I just know, like it's like when you meet somebody that you're going to spend a long time with. Like I meet this plaster, and I was just like, I didn't know where it would go, but I knew that there was a really rich journey. And so I see them as collaborators. I see plaster and myself at this point, like both of us kind of expressing ourselves in the piece as far as we possibly can be. But so I'd been making some of the inflatable ones before, and I've been using plaster for a while. But the key, I think, to the Bemis one was I set out for that curtain. I was like, I want to make a piece that I destroy publicly, and I want to see what that means, because I've been making site works. I've been making, I mean, I try not to use the word installation anymore, because I kind of feel like it's been kidnapped and morphed in all these ways. But like I've been making work that was built on site and had a timeline and couldn't be made anywhere else, materially was stuck there, and then had to be physically destroyed or removed to get out of there. And so that part, the fact that like all of that was so there, but I wasn't necessarily completely aware of clearly I was present working on it, but I wasn't thinking about that whole spectrum of process and delivery, and how much that meant to me, like how important that was to me, and how much I wanted it to come across in the work. And so I'd been destroying pieces for a while, but I had never really thought about the content that possibly was there in that moment, until I'd done right before Bemis. Let me see if I can find a.
Yeah, with the content, you mean like the performative aspect?
Just everything. Like I think what I thought I saw in the moment of a destruction of one of the inflatable pieces right before Bemis was the fact that like that was as close as I could get someone to giving them the tools and having them make the work. Like there was something about being so present, and like what you understood about that material that vision, like the thing is a lot of times, like I'm tricking you with vision initially. Like I think these pieces, like you look at them, you think one thing, they feel soft, they feel billowing. And then all of a sudden you're pulled in because there's visual pleasure to be had, and you kind of get in that way. And then when you actually are present and start really investigating it, that shifts because you realize that it actually isn't that. And vision kind of tricked you. And then you have this kind of much more bodily experience. So I think that with the destruction, I realized that there was so much in the sound and the just palpable materiality and the loss, and like all that combined was just like, I don't know, like there was a reason I kept watching this one video that I took for myself, not like it was just a documentation. And I went to Bemis and I had this video, I just to destroy this piece to clear out the studio because somebody was going to use our studio. And I had one of these inflatable ones in there and I destroyed it. And I was watching this video and I just was like, I have to just, it just felt really rich. And I was just like, like, it seemed also like dangerous territory. Like, am I going to destroy a piece? And that's like the work, like, what is, is that like, felt like,
right.
Is that like a bad place to go? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. And I have to try. And that was like, so the first thing was like, I'm going to build a piece where I destroy it publicly, which was the first curtain. And I was like, what am I going to make? And I really have always wanted to make a curtain. And it just happened that I was like, I'm going to make a theater curtain. And I didn't really think about how metaphorically perfect it was, as it just kind of obviously made total sense after the fact, and like was even more interesting because of the front and the back, and like the work, the back being drippy and work, and the having the scaffolding and kind of having all this infrastructure, and then the front being this visual curtain, and kind of signifying performance. And then I destroyed it. So that one was only up for a couple days. Like really it was only open to the public for an hour, and then I destroyed it.
I love it. Yeah. Well, let's see it.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a lot to unpack with this work too.
Yeah. So I'm going to, this is like early on. Let me just see how to do it here so I don't do it the way before. So this is really horrible quality, but so be it. Let me see if I can do a better screen share than I did before. All right.
You got it.
Oh, wait, let me go back. I want to make sure there's sound. Okay. Oops. Sorry, bear with me. I'm fresh to the Zoom. Sorry.
There's quite a few videos of this particular piece from different angles and different like
yeah. All right, I think I got it now.
This particular video was the one that Bemis took, or
no, this is just an iPhone one, I think. I think my partner in crime Ashley took this one. All right. Do you need to put it on full screen, or can you see it? Are you seeing like my whole screen, or can you see just the video? Are you still there?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Wait, yeah. Can you see just the video, or are you seeing me and my whole screen?
Well, now I can get out of the menu. Now your whole screen is there.
Rock and roll. So yeah, so that was like the first round, the first iteration of this is, I'm going to show one other video because
great.
So anyway, so yeah, that was like, I mean, I didn't have very good video up at the time. Like I just didn't know I didn't really know. I was just documenting it. Most of the best footage, in my opinion, was documentation that other people took. However, like the funny story that kind of is a side tangent, but I mean, there's something about thinking about like how to document this type of work has always been like a really struggle for me in terms of like, I want people to just come see it. I'd rather not document it in that way. So this piece in particular, I was like, okay, no one can film it. There's like 100 people there. I was like, I want everybody to put your phones away. This is about being present. Like, let's experience this thing. I don't know what this is, blah, 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 blah. Well, of course, everybody, like I did this thing. I went and turned the lights off and like I walked back and and everybody's filming. And so, but my favorite footage is this one, which I'm going to share. Let's see here. So this was my dad's footage.
Oh my God.
So like why I show that, because I think that's really funny to me, is just like the whole point is to be present. And so like actually like that footage of that piece, it might be like the best footage I have of any documentation of any of those things, because it was like conveying how he's filming this thing, and this thing's so, he's so, all of a sudden like the thing takes over, and he forgot he was filming, and he just films the ground and his crotch.
Right.
And I'm kind of just like, to me, if I'm going to say like, this is like the experience, this is like, okay, you can look at this guy's footage and kind of get more of like, okay, this was such a potent thing to happen. But anyway, so yeah, so that was the first time I destroyed a thing in front of people. And it was just like, it was amazing to me. I mean, it was kind of like, I'm destroying things anyway. Like why there was so much in that moment too, that just added like a whole nother layer of conversation that I knew I had to kind of keep exploring.
Right. And one of my favorite things to unpack is the impermanence of the metaphor as you speak to losing something. And so many artists are extremely and profoundly attached to their work. Sometimes so, not only is it hard for them to sell it, if they do sell, that it's also hard for them to price it because they don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
But this work, I mean, kind of tangential here, two, this is two different kind of thoughts. But first, the idea of losing something, and what, 1 minute it's there, 1 minute it's not, and kind of seeing that moment videoed, and you interestingly wanted to control that initially, and you didn't want folks to have the memory, or you didn't want folks to relive.
I wanted them to have the memory. That's the thing.
You wanted to have the memory, but you didn't want to have relive it like in a recording, whereas the memory, through the neurons of your brain, you're going to constantly play it back in your brain. But to experience it, it does, as for someone who has lost someone very dear to them, and others potentially that are listening to this right now and viewing this, it really is a profound thought to have this idea to witness its demise, and to really kind of know what happened, to be present at the moment of destruction. And although, I'm not trying to be like, so, I mean, we just had Halloween, I'm not trying to be all horror on anyone. Yet, it's not just a person, but it's the idea of artwork. It's the idea of, potentially a job. It's the idea of potentially just that momentary lapse of your life just changed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's one way to look at it. And I think I definitely think about it that way, but I also don't see them as dying or death. I never saw it that way to begin with. Obviously, like I'm not opposed to it going there. And I think of course, like
sure,
there is like immediate loss. But I also think like, I see that it's like moving forward, and even like, if I can get you to be present for that second, what you gain and what lives on through you after that is the piece, like is the work, like if I can capture you for that moment in time and actually ground you and pass this thing on to you, like, isn't that what art is supposed to do? Like live through you. I mean, like you have it experienced. So I don't know. I do see it as like, it is destruction, but I've always like tried to keep it in a place where it was never, it didn't feel angsty when I was worried about, like I always, like the like bar, like I never was like an art, I wasn't destroying my work. Like I wasn't like, like I'm not going to go smash it. Like it was like, I wanted to be the conductor, but like I was pulling a bar, and the bar, like the curtain was performing. I was just kind of like setting everything into motion, or at least this is how I like wish or want them to be, because I didn't want it to be this angsty, like, oh, he's destroying his work. Like, I'm kind of wanting that thing to just reveal itself and be really present.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I see that I think, I also think that in its, like, what is permanence? Like, what is permanent? And I mean, obviously, like, I think that we, like, think about how we deal with extreme loss. Like, we think about that entity or person or thing, like, living on and being with us and present. And so, like, is it, like, what's worse, like, making an artwork? And I just think, like, I mean, this is not to say, like, must make work to destroy and, like, you shouldn't sell work, and, like, this isn't even like an argument about that. It's just kind of like thinking about, like, how many works get the lid of a crate hammered on them and never come out of like, burying a work alive in a crate is like I'm letting this thing go free, you know. And this is the way I see these pieces, or at least I see part of how they go. And so it's like, you know, if a work doesn't get bought, or if you don't own it, it's what you take away from it. And so I kind of, you know, it's like in its loss, or in their process of being built, being consumed, and then being
Destroyed.
you know, going to their next stage. Yeah, exactly. Like,
Next
I kind of
stage. I like that.
like,
No, it's
I
good.
see people having, like, it's a way for me to, like, really get people to have experience with them. And I kind of think that even when they're really like, the pieces are built, and, like, even the ones that I'm not destroying publicly, like, when you realize they can't be moved, like, you become part of its life. Like, all of a sudden, like, you realize that this thing can't leave here. Like, it was built here. I happen to be at this museum or this space at this time. I am like, even if you're not thinking this, like, you want, like, where is it going to go? What happens to it? Oh, it can't be moved. Like, so this thing is here to exist here for me to consume here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about that presence and that, you know, like, specificity of time.
Momentary. Yeah. The work though, you know, I know in Artfare you have a couple that are editioned that are from 2016, 2014, 13. And I wonder, do you have edition numbers, and, like, you keep your blueprints of sorts? And do you prefer, when the work is potentially sold, that someone also tears it
Yeah, I
apart?
mean, I actually don't even know how they're labeled. I think the edition, I think they're just of a title edition. Like,
Yeah, I
everything
mean,
that's,
I was wondering, because it doesn't list that that they're editioned with, like, 6 only, you know.
yeah, I mean,
wonder
well,
if
there's
you
two
had-
things. I think the pieces on Artfare, well, the drawings, I do like drawings and collages, which are for
Yes.
sale on Artfare, which are one of a kind, but, like, their title might insinuate that they're more, I don't know which ones you're talking about. The other ones, I've never really sold a piece, like, I mean, okay, I'll be brass tacks. Like, Artfare, I was like, okay, like, hey, do you want to be on Artfare? I'm kind of like, I'm not a sales artist.
Right.
Let's be brass tacks about it. So, like, I haven't, like, I never thought about, I mean, I haven't thought about it. I obviously, like, watch people sell things, but I really was like, that was never it was just never in my thought process ever in making anything. And which probably led me to where I am now, and how, like, destroying things and making pieces that are one-offs and one of a kind pieces.
Right. Well, you are commissioned to make the work you make in museums at this point, you know, and
Yeah, but they're
Beijing.
all impermanent, which is fascinating and
Impermanent.
amazing. And, like, when
Yeah.
that happens, like, I mean, I still find it remarkable that I've been able to get to this point without, I mean, I literally have only sold 2 things in my entire life, which I know, like, we're on Artfare. I'm like, I should be saying, like, I'm promoting it.
Well,
This is
no,
not, like, I'll be honest. Like,
Artfare
I
is a
mean, sell
community.
as in, like, physical sold pieces. I've only sold 2 things ever. But in terms of, like, grants, commissions, pieces that are exactly like institutions asking for a piece, that's, you know, that's, like, a different story. But it's kind of amazing that it's, like, worked to this point, you know. So but yeah, I don't know, like, I don't even know if I don't really know how it would work if somebody, like, picked one of the pieces. Let's just say somebody picked one of the pieces on Artfare that are a sculpture and asked to buy it. Like, to me, it's more like a placeholder for, like, okay, what's the space?
Yeah, sure.
Let's make a piece. Like, oh, you really like that one? Cool. Like, let's talk. Like, but I'd still, I mean, if they're like, I want that one verbatim, well, for, like, I don't know how you can't replicate it to a T. But I mean, like, if somebody was like, I really love that piece from 2013, like, called, you know, Double Hull. Like, can you make it for me? It would be an interesting conversation. Like, I've never been really broached to think about that. I mean, that the piece I'm
Right.
talking about.
I mean, this curveball question, I was thinking to myself like, ooh, I would love to, get one of these editions and then,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's funny to think about it because I don't know. It's more like I can't wait for that territory to.
Well, I appreciate the fact, most importantly, that you are, and there are many artists out there like this. You're not alone with the thought, but it is more unique these days, and you want to make it as an artist. And a lot of time, making means to-ching,
Yeah.
and
Don't get me wrong.
therefore,
I've been thinking about it lately.
yeah. Right. Well, I mean, you're doing other things also
Yeah.
alongside your work, as we were talking about, many hats, and as you're designing and you're working with folks and commissions, and you have a very active and prolific making ability, extremely just great work ethic is what we can see, what I can see. And but it is important to note as an artist that talks about the ethereal within this making and the sculpture, is it really there, that impermanence, that idea that it is also very important that you're not very concerned with your market value and
Yeah.
whether or not it's gonna sell, because it better get out there. But I also last kind of thought about the market is just like, I really value your idea that putting work into a crate and shipping it off and having it sit in a warehouse, and this weren't your exact words, but this is what I was envisioning, is the coffin for the work.
I see that work being buried alive.
Yeah.
I mean, the percentage of work that's sitting in storage is insane. And
Yes,
so
it
it's
is.
like, I don't know, people get really, the question people ask me a lot is, they're just like, how can you do, like, you spent 4 months making this thing and that's it? You just like get rid of it? And I'm like, and I just talk about like, well, what is preservation? Like, what does it mean what does it mean for something to continue to give life? And like, what is preservation? Like, I'm like, if you went to the Louvre and you're only going to go to the Louvre one time in your entire life and you see 1,000 works of art, and you come home on the plane and you remember 3 of them and the Louvre burns down on the way home. So what's the difference? What about the 900, 800, 999 pieces that you didn't affect you? Like, they're gone, and like, you didn't buy them because you couldn't, and they didn't affect you enough to remember. I'm just kind of like, what is preservation? Like, because you know something exists in the world, that means that it's more potent. Or if you actually go to see my show or go to see a theatrical moment of a destruction, and a year later you're still like, man, I did these pieces. We were living, before we live in Newburgh, which is where I live now, upstate. I got this grant funding to do a curtain piece. I did a three curtains. I destroyed 3 in a row. And I had an audience maybe like 350 people, which was kind of amazing for this tiny little town. And they were like, 90% of them were just like, my bartender, my mailman, the people around town, like people who knew who we were because we were around there. They didn't have a clue what they were in or doing, but they felt comfortable enough to go. And I did this piece, and like, I remember like 2 years later, people being like, I still don't know what that was, but I tell everybody about, like, they are thinking about it. Like, it's like fodder for them to just like question what the heck something is. And I think
your work affected them, which I think is really brilliant. What do you have video of the 3, the momentary repetition? Is that what that one was called?
Yeah, I do. I'll put it on.
Cool. And then also the one, I think it was called Sojourn. Is that the one that you have? It's got like a canopy drape where you're walking through it, and it's a little bit longer.
Is it a curtain piece? Are you talking about maybe you're talking about Cascade?
Cascade.
Which maybe I'll play first, if that's okay, because
play that
one came first, and actually it led me to making the 3, and I'll talk about it. Maybe I can talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Let me screen share this thing.
Thank you.
So this piece I can talk about. There's like a little intro.
let's begin.
Yeah, so this is in Seattle at a place called Suyama Space. And it was part of there was an architecture firm, and then this curator kind of basically built this whole installation venue in this one front space. Anyway, amazing woman, bestsellers. The space was just like, to someone who like has dedicated their career to building site-specific works, like just to see a curator give this much importance to work that like takes consideration to the architecture and was built on site. So their plan was they're not in existence anymore, which is really sad. But they did like a really like 1 month install, 3 month run. So this piece had another curtain, which you can kind of see the remnants of in front of me, which I brought down like the day before. But so this piece had been up for 3 months. And had these two kind of facing curtains that kind of blocked all the light, which I can kind of show some pictures of if you want. But they were not, this piece, like I had to convince the owner of the space to let me do this. And luckily there was a journalist who was writing about the piece, and she kind of like got so many people excited about it that it forced its hand. Like this one to me was like my favorite of all of them. Like I think the one, I just love the one. I love the fact that it existed as a sculpture. Existed as a sculpture for 3 months. People were able to explore it that way. And then
did folks clean? I mean, they cleaned up the space. Or did they leave it in that state for how long? And I thought I read somewhere that people were allowed to take shards.
Yes, I never thought, but from the Bemis one, people were like,
oh, okay,
all about taking a piece of it, and I was like, they didn't really think much of it. But then I kind of just loved the idea. Like, it's not only do you have like the memory of it, but no video, but you have this little thing on your shelf that's like this memento of a piece. I mean, my dream is to do one where I have enough people there that at the end I just sweep up a pile of dust and that's it. Like that many people take pieces of it that it's just gone. Like I have that pipe dream. But people, I mean, it's absurd. People are like coming up to me with like shards and like, here, sign. Like I'm signing these pieces and I'm kind of like, what? Like, okay. And but I love it. I kind of love that people take pieces of it. And like a lot of people are like, oh, you got to charge money for all that. Just like, if people were that excited about the work to want to have a piece of it, and like are present for that moment, and I'm like all about it. This I'll show you. Can I show you one other video while we're talking?
Yeah.
About it? So that one was great because we had these. There was like a video crew doing a piece on it, which was awesome for a TV station, and they filmed the crowd, which I'm not going to show the whole thing, but like let me see if I. I'll just fast forward. This woman right here. There's this I just have never seen the crowd because I'm always like I'm working on this thing to like make this happen, and it's engineering and I don't know. But this woman who's in the back right here. And like the best is she stays that way for like 4 minutes while I'm talking. Like it comes back. Like I'm gonna fast forward it, but like, oh yeah, it comes back to her and she's still like,
she's in awe.
Her mouth is still open. I just love her. Anyway. But it's just like, I never have, I'm always so present in just like, is this going to work? Like, am I going to kill anybody? I got like pipes like that. The engineering is all homespun. So you just never know. Like the 3 curtain one, which I'll show, I guess I'll put on while we're talking.
Wait, Ian, you just throwing aside, am I going to kill anyone? I mean,
everybody's like, oh, like the owner of the space was just like, he's an architect. I mean, that piece was amazing because it's in an architecture firm, which was so cool. And so I'm there all night. I had no assistants so there's 2 curtains. Each one was a little over 2,000 pounds. I had pitched this idea. I had no idea if I could do it. Those were completely freestanding. I like rigged everything up in my studio at home, packed my van, drove out with my dad all the way to Seattle. I spent 31 days nonstop building that thing. But I remember I hung those, it was EPDM rubber, the mold, weighed about 700 pounds. So I built this crazy rigging system and I'm like, rig it up in space and I hang it. And the structural engineer for the firm came in and goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna spray plaster on this and cast this curtain." And he goes, "There's no way that's gonna work." And I go, "Okay."
Oh no.
5 days later, I pull the mold off and he's just sitting there like jaw on the floor. And he was like, "This is amazing." Like he was just blown away. But like that relationship where like he's dealing with materials, but I'm like, no. Like, you know that about materials and I know this about materials, and like, we'll meet in the middle and you'll see what happens. So that was a fun experience with that show, because I was like interacting with architects and and engineers, you know, so I see myself as like, you know, concocting my own my own engineering hat and my own architecture hat, but yet not necessarily having to follow their rules. And I think they were just kind of like, wow, like, look at what you can do with a material. Like, this is just, you know, they use materials all the time, but obviously there's codes and regulation. But I think it was like a really interesting pairing of like the conversation that came out of that piece and the time of installing it. So
yeah, absolutely. And to see folks with their masks but not wearing them too, I'm like,
well, a lot of people didn't really know. Like,
so they didn't know what they were walking into.
And it's like 50-50. They like, some people knew I was going to destroy it, but like they are so close to it, and like just the intensity, I just don't think people really like, they also, I mean, you tell someone that's plaster and they go, yeah, okay. And then you destroy it in front of them and they're like, that was plaster. You know, there's just like, again, like, it's so much about giving someone so much of the material. But I think a lot of people, like half those people knew, another half kind of like sort of knew, but didn't really, like, I didn't spell it out. Like, this is what's going to happen. Like, I said, you know, hey, thanks for coming. Like, really appreciate George and Beth for letting me come, blah, blah, blah. And then I like did the little dance and took the little thing off and like did the thing. And then it, you know, it was just like, I don't think any of them, nobody really knew, including myself. Like, that's why I keep doing them, because I don't really know how it's going to feel or what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we've got like 8 or 7 or so minutes left. Yeah. And I just was wondering, what are you working on now? You've got these fantastic pieces, these fantastic ideas. The piece at MAD, you know, is kind of, you left off there. And I'm wondering if you had any other museums or people approach you to create these?
Yeah, it's, well, no. I mean, the way it's kind of worked over the last like 7-8 years, it usually ends up being like 1 or 2 things a year, which is kind of like perfect, even though like I always want more, but I also like, I put so much into one of these pieces and it takes so much, and I'm usually the sole operator on the whole thing. So that's usually been like, it's typically a pretty good timeline. I was supposed to do, so the Mad Art piece was the last big project. And then I was in conversation, which looked like it was going to happen, to do a piece in South Korea for a biennial, which was like a weird negotiation, but it looked like it was going to happen. And then my partner was like, "You're not going to South Korea in the middle of a pandemic, like, and leave me with the kid." Like, sorry. And I'm just like, you're right. But I definitely toyed with that. And then I did a piece. So that was kind of a bummer, but that was like the last thing on the horizon. And then I got invited to do just this group show, outdoor group show this summer, which was just at like a friend's property that they've done. It's called White Rock Center for the Arts. This is the second year they've done this kind of show of local artists. And anyway, so I used that as, I like normally wouldn't take on like something like that, but I had a hankering to make this piece that I've had in my brain for a long time. And I kind of thought, you know what, like, this is a perfect opportunity to give it a whirl. So even though it was like small in comparison to the scale I normally work at, it was like really, really, really challenging, because that's just what
do you have any shots of that?
Seems to get me off. Yeah, let me pull one up. Let's see.
And then, is this a work that you plan on? You must destroy, or?
Yeah, it will get destroyed. Although I'm going to leave it there as long as I can. I don't know. Can I, let's see how I do this. All right, let me screen share again. Yeah, so can you see this thing?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's see. So this is the mold. Whoops. Oh boy. Let's have to do it like this. So this was the mold. So basically I've wanted to do this piece inside of a space for a long time, but I really wanted to cast, I also have been drawing it outside. I just wanted to cast like a slab of plaster around, in and around architecture or nature. So this real linear piece. So that's demolding. Let's see if I can do it this way. So this was the piece. So like it just, I mean, classically, like a lot of things, it just seems really simple, but it was so hard to make a mold, especially around organic forms like trees.
Yeah.
So I had to like, and that's 500 pounds of plaster. So if you just think about like hydraulic pressure, it like to make the mold and make it tight enough to fit around a tree, but also hold all that weight was just like a classically a very crazy technical challenge. But that's a lot of the ways that a lot of the projects are like really technically hard, but I enjoy trying to figure out how to do that. So I'm hoping this piece is still up. I just went and visited it. I mean, it's again, like for someone who doesn't have a piece up for that long, it's always fun to have one that runs a little longer. Like usually, typically it's like a you know, a month or two run depending on the space. But like sometimes there's sometimes things have a bit of a longer run. This is like a very unique situation for something that I'd normally do. So
You're right. If White Rock Sculpture Center is upstate, but it's also just a home of some just
it's pretty, you know, it's cool. It's pretty bare bones, and they just had this property they bought, and they kind of started inviting artists to come build things. So this was, I think there was maybe 12 or so other people this year. You know, they call it the White Rock Invitational, and yeah, it was really pretty. I mean, it was so fun to be out there building outside, and like it felt nice because like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to make it, but it also was like the stakes, not to put them down in any way, but the stakes were lower for me, like in terms of what let's see.
Well, it'll be also interesting in relationship to time if it's going to be up a little longer with any kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice for me to revisit, but also just like it actually is eroding. It's like you're seeing some of the cast lines, and it's fun to have it outside for a lot of reasons. And I've never really done that, and it's a different kind of challenge. But I really want to make one of those. My like pipe dream is to make a what's it called? Smack melon. I've been like coveting that space, but I just like had the image on the wall forever, and I was like, I'm gonna make something there, but no idea it worked. And then this is my idea now is like I want to, you know how there's like all this columns, so there's square columns, and you know the space sort of. Anyway, it's in Brooklyn, and it's a cool space, but I just want to cast this like 20,000 pound like slice through all those columns. That's kind of like at a pitch, so you're kind of like, it's kind of disorienting, and it's like a Gordon Clark meets Rachel White-Reed like / all my heroes combined into my like Kate Studs. But it would be like the craziest mold and the really intense pour, and I don't know, I just think it would just this like really nutty slice through all this. So that's my like dream goal for that type of work. But maybe somewhere outside. I mean, I was pretty happy with. I'm happy that I figured it out, and every time I go look at that piece, like I'm excited about it and where it could go. It's kind of like back to the roots of where I first started making. Like I remember the first plaster piece I made in grad school was basically like a 4x4 by 5 foot slab that was like a half-inch thick off the wall, and like I was like, I remember having a studio visit. I was like,
slab.
This is it, like the future, and people were like, this is so dumb, like what are you talking about? And that was like my first foray into like, I'm gonna use plaster forever.
Well, it's good that the slab 2, I guess it would be at White Rock, was kind of like a precursor to this Smack Melon visualization manifestation. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I need a fund. I mean, they have no funding, so I need
Right.
funding. But anybody out there, you people watching right now,
Well, it's just
um,
incredible, Ian, to really dig down into the depth of your practice, your materiality, the just the amount of kind of experimentation with knowledge coupled with, kind of try again, and your ability to problem solve is so commendable, and the work is just a delight to watch and to see in person, speak from experience. And
yeah.
this little artist interview studio visit has been awesome.
Hey, this is fun. It's nice to get people in here, even if it's virtually. So
Yeah.
I love talking about it. I feel like that was an hour, and now I'm like, we didn't even get to anything.
Yeah, I know, but we got to some cool stuff,
I
and
know, I know. I
whipped
also
out
can talk
some
forever, so
good
hopefully I
lingo.
was precise enough. So
Saw some great videos and got a little taste of your practice. And yeah, we just wish you the best. Really glad you're on Art Fair, and those drawings are hot.
yeah,
And
I'm gonna rearrange my art fair thing and try to. Your wife Liz has gotten me thinking a lot more about like, okay, like if you're gonna sell something, like let's be smart about it. So
that's right.
I am glad I'm on Art Fair, and even though I did say that I didn't know why they asked me originally, I do think that there is sellable content,
You
and
have great value, Ian. Yeah.
I those drawings I really do love them. It's like so hard to take an image of them, but they're these the collage pieces, and they're like
Yeah, they're rich. They
layered paper, and they're
sure.
in person. I personally have really loved making them, and I've found them really rewarding. So it'd be nice to. I need to try to capture an image of them better. Anyway,
Definitely.
yeah.
Well, thank you again. Next week we have Sophie Kahn for those of you who are listening. Really excited. Thank you again, Ian. We'll be
Thank
seeing you very
you.
soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
And have
Thanks a
a
lot.
great night.
You too.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.